It was a quiet and peaceful night on the island of Sodor. While Percy and Thomas took the mail trains, and Henry took the flying kipper, the rest of the engines lay hunkered in the shed, fast asleep. On other parts of the island, all was quiet. In Farmer McCall's field, cows grazed and slept, until they were disturbed by a growling and roaring sound coming from the sky. Percy was at Mayfway dropping off bags of mail, when a massive bluish and green streak of light shot across the air. "Whoa, did you see that, driver?" Percy gasped. "I did," his driver replied. The streak of light roaring through the air disappeared out of Percy and his driver's sight, well over the horizon. Henry, in the meantime, was traveling along the tracks with the kipper, when the roar of the streaking object grew loud and whooshed over Henry, making the air crackle and rumble in its wake. "Oh my goodness!" exclaimed Henry, and his driver applied the brakes. The streak soared into nearby woodlands with a tremendous crash. The trees swayed in the shockwave. We better tell someone," Henry's driver suggested, and surged Henry forward to the nearest signal box. The fire brigade was alerted, but thankfully there was no major fire at the center of the crash. Researchers came and found a soccer ball-sized rock-like substance at the base of the crater. "Very interesting. This one is one for the history books," the Fat Controller inquired to the lead researcher. "Indeed," says the researcher. "There's only been one other record of an asteroid touching Sudrian soil, but it's been well over a century since. This will make a fine museum artifact," the Fat Controller states. "That it will, but I'd like to study what elements are contained within the matter," the researcher says. The impact of the asteroid made headlines across the island. All the engines were talking about it in the sheds in the next morning. "The last time an asteroid struck the island surface was well after Edward was born," joked Gordon. "Oh, knock it off. I'm old, but not that old," scoffed Edward. "Like ancient," snorted James. "Shut it," Edward glared. "I believe all of us are lucky to live in a time where the second asteroid hits," Toby says. "It's not often we have such excitement." "I'll agree to that," Thomas replies. "The colors of the fireball were amazing," Percy states, describing what he saw, as did Henry. "What I don't understand," states Henry, "is how small the asteroid was when it finally landed. It looked so much larger when it was flying over the sky." "That has to do with the Earth's atmosphere, Henry," Toby explains. "Objects traveling at speed entering the Earth's atmosphere burn up on entry. It's actually very common. Though there was something bizarre that I saw when it flew over me," Percy squeaks, and everyone turned to listen to him. "What I saw was an amazing, colorful, flaming tail of blue and green, surrounding an object that looked metallic, too smooth in texture to be just a space rock." "Are you implying that this was some sort of craft, little Percy?" Gordon snorts. "What rubbish!" James scoffs at the thought of the island being visited by little green men. "Hey, all I'm stating, that's what I saw," finished Percy. As the engines began their workday, almost every station and every yard had passengers and workmen all talking about the asteroid. The opinions were split into two groups, thinking it was about space matter, and the other half believing it was a UFO. Later in the evening, James was tasked with taking a delivery of fuel from Rendam Docks to the depot late. He was trundling along and making great time as he approached the beginning of Gordon's Hill. But as he began to climb, he noticed the bushes off the side of the tracks. He thought he could see an electric blue glow shining through the branches and leaves. The light would pulse and flash before fading. "Driver, did you see that?" But before James could finish, his driver quickly switched on his brakes and James screeched to a halt. James was flabbergasted before blinking and looking at the tracks in front of him, and there was a cow. "Oh, for pity's sake, be off with you!" James demands the cow to move, but the cow just stared up at James. not making a sound. "I said be off!" James snapped again. "Move!" James said sarcastically as rolling his eyes. "Out of the way, dopey!" The cow continued making extreme eye contact with James. James's driver and fireman stared at the cow ahead of them, finding the cow's behavior odd. James impatiently blew his whistle, and the cow still didn't react or move. It just stared. "Okay, this is driving my patience," James scoffed. James's driver and fireman stepped out of the cab, walking towards the cow, hoping they could encourage the cow to move. But before they could, the cow's eyes, still staring at James, flashed yellow and opened its jaw. But instead of a moo, it let out an abnormal screech. Before standing completely upright on its hind legs and sprinting off the tracks into the bushes. James was absolutely terrified, as were his driver and fireman. They breathed heavily for a second before regaining their composure as the adrenaline wore off. The next morning, both James's driver and fireman met the Fat Controller in his office. "I know it sounds far-fetched, sir, but you've got to believe us," James's driver and fireman explained to him. "I do not like being lied to, Scott. Now, please, just be honest. Have you and Arthur been drinking again?" James's fireman Arthur just sighed and was about to walk out of the office, followed by his partner, James's driver Scott, when suddenly he thought, "Fine, you don't believe us? Then ask James. He saw it too." The two men left the office without another word. The Fat Controller thought for a moment, but he considered it. James was in his shed, still shaken by the sight he saw last night. He only looked up from his buffers as the Fat Controller walked around to his front. "James," the Fat Controller said with a certain gravity in his voice. James could only mutter though. "Sir, what did you see last night, James?" The Fat Controller asks it, sincerely and sternly. His expression only changed slightly as James retold what he witnessed. The Fat Controller could only pause, and before he said anything, the yard phone rang. The controller went over to answer it. "Excuse me, James." "Yes?" "Yes, I'm at Tidmouth. Why?" "Farmer McCall." "Oh, I'll be there momentarily," and he hung up. "I have to go, James. You may have the day off." James could only acknowledge the Fat Controller as he watched Topham enter his blue car and speed away, en route to Farmer McCall's ranch. When he arrived, Thomas was there, in a small train of empty cattle wagons. Police officers were there as well. The field where McCall's cows grazed was half empty, except for a large patch of burnt grass 40 feet in diameter, and around it, half a dozen dead and mutilated cows, while the other half were missing. The police were absolutely dumbfounded. Veterinarians couldn't find a reasonable cause of death for the mauled cows. They were unrecognizable, almost as if they've been turned inside out. Officers initially thought wolves or even poachers, but none of the patterns added up, including the large circular patch of burnt grass. In the coming weeks, despite the sight that James and his crew saw, and the fact an asteroid hit the island only days prior, the police concluded that the cows were poached and the grass was vandalized by arsonists. But to James, his crew, and Thomas and Percy and Henry, a lot of them began to believe that they were visited by visitors not of earthly origin.